Well, good morning. It's Monday morning. We're back from our wedding excursion, and we had a great time and great time with family. Today, we're going to start the story in Matthew 17 of the Transfiguration, and I'm only going to do a little bit at a time, so it's going to take us a few days to get through this entire story. Starts off and says, "And after 6 days, Jesus took with him Peter and James and John his brother, and led them up a high mountain by themselves. And he was transfigured before them, and his face shone like the sun, and his clothes became white as light. And behold, there appeared to them Moses and Elijah talking with him." Well, this is a very strange event, isn't it? He becomes transfigured. He becomes changed. Well, first of all, he takes his 3 favorite, closest inner circle disciples with him, goes up a high mountain by themselves. So he's up, alone. And there he's transfigured. The Greek word is metamorphosed. So he changed his form. The best way to understand that is that they began to see him in his glory. To the extent that any human being could see him in his glory and survive it, they did. God often hides his glory. Moses goes up on the mountain of Sinai, which is a parallel to this, actually. And Moses goes up on the mountain and gets the law from God. And there Moses asks God, can I see you? Without the clouds hiding you. And God says, you can't do that and live, but I'll let you see my back as I go by. And so he sort of sees the Lord from behind and from a distance. Even so, when Moses comes down the mountain, his face shines from the glory of God. So we're led to believe then that seeing God in his glory would overwhelm us and kill us. That's the first thing we can see. His face shone like the sun, and his clothes became white as light. If you think about the ancient world, they didn't have a lot of the things that we have, and so they didn't have the right metaphors. I think in Mark it says his clothes became so white as no fuller could bleach them. A fuller is a person who does bleach. And the whitest thing that Mark can think of is cloth that's been bleached and bleached and bleached. And he says not even a good fuller could get something as white as Jesus was, shining. Of course, we've got lights that'll just burn your eyes out, and so we know about brightness, but they didn't know about these things. So the translators have said here, his face shone like the sun, which is a pretty good metaphor, and his clothes became white as light, because, that of which nothing greater can be thought, the ancients would have said this, as white as could possibly be. So he begins to shine and glow, which is another characteristic of when God's glory is around. And then he sees Moses and Elijah, and they recognize Moses and Elijah. And you're going, well, wait a minute. How do they recognize them? There's no photography. There are no paintings. There are no... How would they have known what Moses and Elijah look like? There are cultural stereotypes. We all know that Abraham Lincoln was a tall, craggy fellow with a big beard and a stovepipe hat, right? There is a man in Gettysburg these days who looks like Lincoln, has a beard, wears a stovepipe hat, and makes his money imitating Lincoln at various things. I have seen this guy, and you would think there's Abraham Lincoln. He looks exactly like him. Well, he looks like we think Lincoln probably looked, because I've never sat down with this guy and Lincoln's picture side by side. But it's good enough to fool us, right? Or we all know what Santa Claus looks like. Chubby guy with big beard, They knew what Moses and Elijah were supposed to look like in those days. And knowing that, they were able to they were able to recognize Moses and Elijah by the stereotypes and by the things they'd been taught since they were small children. And so they recognized this is Moses and that's Elijah. Moses stands for the law. Elijah stands for the prophets. The law and the prophets all point to the Messiah, which is Jesus. And so we see what's going on here. Tomorrow we'll read the next few verses and see what the reaction of the disciples is, and especially poor old Peter. But for now, imagine that you're with Jesus and he just begins to shine. We'll see you tomorrow.